Let's bring in political analyst and builder movement partner Steven Olikara. Steven, a lot of things happening in the last couple of hours here. Obviously, we're continuing to follow this breaking news. You got Vice President JD Vance, a U.S. delegation along with him, Iranian officials. They're all in Switzerland right now in this kind of first rounds of talks and negotiations following that MOU. Let me play you really quickly something the VP said earlier.
Peace always requires a little bit of work. It always requires a little bit of give and take. But the President of the United States is committed not just to peace between the United States and Iran. The President is committed to a regional peace, which is why we're here working so hard to settle our issues.
Something that we've been focusing on is the juxtaposition of that kind of milder tone from the VP, that in-person diplomacy, and then just, moments after the VP said that, we saw President Trump post another threat to Iran, saying the country must stop their proxies from causing trouble in Lebanon or the U.S. is going to retaliate again, also saying that he would blow them up if Tehran closes the Strait of Hormuz. What do you make of what we're seeing here? It's this bit of good cop, bad cop situation.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting a good cop, bad cop, or diplomatic tone versus non-diplomatic tone between the vice president and the president. Look, the problem here that the president is facing is that there are multiple issues regarding Iran. In that last Truth Social post, he's talking about the state-sponsored terrorism that Iran funds in terms of Hezbollah. But there are other issues in terms of the nuclear enrichment, and the one that's actually the crux of the deal that's negotiating right now is opening the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that's what JD Vance is mainly trying to negotiate, is getting the world back to an economic status quo where there's a free flow of goods along the Strait of Hormuz, because both the president and the vice president know that Americans, whether you're Democrat or Republican, are unhappy with this inflation, the rising cost of fuel that affects all Americans. And so they're very desperate to try and address that issue. The other issues really need to be resolved over the next 60 days, including the details of how to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon.
While the U.S.'s delegation is in Switzerland trying to get to the second stage of this potential peace agreement, which would be a lasting peace deal, back here at home, we are continuing to see several Democrats be really critical, first and foremost, of the administration's involvement with Iran. You got New Jersey Senator Cory Booker saying that he believes the current deal puts us in a worse position than we were at before this. Take a listen.
The way he is trying to bring us out of this war not only speaks to the failures of the war in total, but it also speaks in a bipartisan way to how bad of a leader he is. Iran gets all of the benefits, literally billions and billions of dollars, and America continues to hurt and see the losses.
And it's not just Democrats, right? I mean, we are seeing some Republican lawmakers be critical of the administration's negotiations with Iran, particularly that MOU and some points in there where, Iran gets funding that some fear would help it build up and come back stronger. What do you make of that, and even potentially what the role of all this is going to play in a couple months, when we look ahead to the midterms?
Definitely a role. The president and his administration are trying as quickly as possible to get a deal that can open the Strait of Hormuz and reduce costs, because that is the #1 driving issue in the midterm elections. Now, to what Senator Booker was talking about, this is, I think, the concern with the deal is that as it's currently drafted, Iran would get a $300 billion reconstruction fund paid by regional partners, and they get sanctions relief as well as their assets unfrozen. So that's a lot of economic benefits going in their direction in exchange largely for getting us back to an open Strait of Hormuz. So the U.S. is currently negotiating from a weaker position than where we were before this war. And talking with my Republican friends and sources, they would even agree that this war has not played out the way that the administration wanted, and now they're not as strong in terms of their leverage going into these negotiations. That said, if JD Vance were here, he would say that Iran gets no benefits unless they abide by these rules and reopen things. But again, what the Obama deal had done previously was focus on preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Now what we're negotiating is getting back to an open Strait of Hormuz, which is how it was previous to this war. So I do think the administration is negotiating from a weaker position than they were before this war.
And we certainly know that the president and vice president have also said at the end of this, which is a kind of wait and see, that the agreement in the end is going to be better than that JCPOA, that 2015 agreement under the Obama administration. Again, that's probably a wait and see at this point. Before I let you go, I do want to hone back in on the economic impact of this conflict, because I think, to your point a moment ago, the American consumer, we just did a segment on cookouts for this summer and how much more expensive that is this year. I ate a hot dog, and that's 7.7% higher this year than it was last year. Thank goodness NewsNation is paying for that hot dog. But for a lot of American families, that's a lot of money, not to mention price at the pump that have come down a little bit, but are still up, around $1 more than they were at ahead of this conflict. How much of that economic impact as a result of this conflict is going to affect how Americans vote in November? Or do you think the Republican Party does have a point in the safety, for the long-term future over these potential short-term economic pains?
I think the main issue is, like you described, the cost of hot dogs as Americans go into this July 4th weekend, celebrating the 250th of America at a time when we're at war abroad. And I do think the economics of the midterm election this year are pretty baked in at this point. On the flip side, if you look at the generic ballot between Democrat and Republican, Democrats are actually not as far ahead as you would expect them to be at this point. I think that's because Democrats still have a branding and a messaging issue that's still struggling to connect with working class voters. Meanwhile, working class voters are feeling the greatest pain in terms of the rising cost of goods, and they're definitely going to feel it this upcoming holiday weekend around Independence Day. So this is going to be a driving issue. I do think you might see some relief if and when a peace deal gets signed. Will Americans be concerned with the details around, the nuclear aspects and the missiles and the state sponsoring of terrorism? I would hope that Americans are, but the reality is they're focused on what's in front of them right now, and that is cost of life is way too high.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point in that you would expect Democrats to be miles ahead at this point, given the economic pain that some Americans are feeling. And that's not necessarily the case. And in addition, even though there are, some who are not fond of President Trump's handling of this conflict and the economic impact, he's still batting almost 1,000 when it comes to, candidates that he's backed in the primary. So he still seems to have some strength in the Republican Party itself. We'll find out, though, in a few months how voters decide. Steven Olikara, always great to have you on. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you. Great seeing you.
Likewise. All right, coming up.